India gets whitewashed for the first time at home in the history of Indian Test cricket while playing 3 or more Test matches. And this just reminded me of how awful the Indian batters' form are in right now. But this also reminded me of one such player. Now, last Tuesday we made a video on Cheteshwar Pujara, and on Friday we made a video on Virat Kohli, the number 3 and number 4. If you haven't watched that already, go back and watch it and subscribe because we release videos 3 times a week. So subscribe to get that notification. And like I said, this just reminded me of one such batter at number 5 that India's had for the most number of times. He's the highest scorer in the number 5 position as an Indian in Test matches. He's the second highest run scorer in the world batting at number 5. Of course, he's played more innings and all of that. But still, he was a good player of spin. He was a fantastic player of pace bowling. He was also supposed to be the next captain after Virat Kohli, but then he gets dropped, and there are a lot of opinions on this. Of course, I'm talking about Ajinkya Rahane. Now, Rahane, the batter, is just very interesting to look at. He is someone who could play both kind of innings. He had an innings of 51 of 159 balls at a strike rate of 32.07 against England in 2018, and he also had a 147 of 171 balls at a strike rate of 85.96 in Australia in Melbourne. The fact that he could grind it out trying to save the Test match and the fact that he could have a quick innings just showed you how dynamic he is. He could adapt his game depending on the situation, and he more often than not did. He was not just a decent batter, he was a fantastic fielder. He's 7th on the list of Indians for the number of catches he's taken in Test matches with 102 catches. Now with this, he's also won the Border Gavaskar Trophy in Australia. With this, he's also won against Australia at home to win the series 2-1 when Virat Kohli was unavailable for the 4 Test match in 2017. With this, he made a comeback to the Indian team to play the WTC final in 2023 after going back to playing Ranji Trophy cricket with an average of 57.63 that included 200s. He was also the highest scorer in that WTC final for the Indian team. And that's not it. Every time we think of Rahane the batter, we think of someone who's walking into bat with 3 or 4 down under pressure, and he would get those runs for the Indian team. If you go back to 2015 in the 4th Test match between India and South Africa at Delhi, Ajinkya Rahane scored 200s in one match. He was the only man to reach 100 anyway, and apart from him, only Virat and Aswin scored 50 plus in the entire match. Even in the 2020-21 Border Gavaskar Trophy in Australia, Rahane scores 100 in Melbourne, and apart from him, Jadeja is the only one who scored 50 plus again in the entire match. Now when you come back home to the 2017 Border Gavaskar Trophy in the 2nd Test match, India batted first, conceded a lead, and then had a batting collapse in the 3rd innings. But Pujara and Rahane had 100-run partnership for Aswin to then get 6 wicket in the 4th innings for India to then go on to win the match. And how can we forget the 2014 Lord's Test match? A place where Sachin hasn't scored a century, a place where Virat hasn't scored a century. But Ajinkya Rahane in that innings, not only did he score 100, but apart from Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, no one even crossed 30. That is the kind of batter Ajinkya Rahane was. The man showed grit every time he walked into bat. Regardless of the situation, he played the situation. If he was walking into bat after a long partnership, he would go in and attack because he was naturally an attacking player. He had most of the shots in the book. He was technically right up there, and every time he walked into bat under pressure, you know he was going to grind it out. But after the WTC final in 2023, Ajinkya Rahane is then again the vice captain with Rohit Sharma the captain when they go to West Indies, where he played 2 matches where he averaged 5.50, and then ever since Rahane hasn't played a Test match for the Indian team. Now a lot of people think, especially those guys who commented on the Pujara's video talking about how it's not Pujara we need back but it's Rahane, talked about how Rahane was done wrong. And this is what we're going to look at. If he was done wrong, or did he deserve to get dropped? And if he does even make a comeback right now, if he will do any better. Now if you look at his yearly average, you would assume that this is a kind of batter who would have a very, very long career. Of course, he had a dip in 2017 and 18, but then he took off in 2019 with an average of 71.3. What happens after, we will talk about that. And that is what we're going to talk about. What happened to him after 2020? Because before 2020, he played 66 innings with an average of 43.74. And after 2020, he played 39 innings with an average of just 25.39. He went from 43 to 25. Now this got me thinking. When we talk about Rahane the batter, there is this general opinion that people have where he would not perform for a long time, then get that one score and then continue to not perform. But because of that one score, he would continue to be in the Indian team. So this got me thinking about the number of starts and failures Rahane has had before 2020 and post 2020. Pre 2020, Rahane has gotten out between 0 and 30 53.3% of the time, whereas post 2020 this has increased to 66.6% of the time. Pre 2020, Rahane got 30 plus scores 44.7% of the time, whereas post 2020 it dipped down to 30.7% of the time. That's like getting a 30 plus score after a little more than 3 innings, and that is just not good enough at an international level. But what was the problem, right? Like, why did Rahane's form dip so much post 2020? And usually we would have a technical breakdown, but Rahane over the years didn't make a lot of changes to his technique because he didn't necessarily need to. Of course, he had a trigger movement which changed quite a bit, but a lot of batters do that depending on the condition and the bowler, which is absolutely fine. So Rahane's technique never went through a critical period like a Virat Kohli in 2024 or Pujara post 2019. So what was Rahane's problem in the first place? It was the fact that every time he almost got a start or every time he would walk into bat, he would want to put his front foot forward, which means that he would poke at deliveries he wouldn't necessarily need to. He would hang his bat at balls which he would have left pre 2020, and this can be for a variety of different reasons. We know that batters over the years lose their discipline. Best example I can think of currently is Rohit Sharma, who has left so many balls in England to get those runs, and then currently he is trying to attack every other ball, which is also why his average this year is what it is. Or he was just trying to change his style of play as a batter, where Rahane would walk into bat and be more attacking, be someone like a Virat Kohli, because Rahane and Virat Kohli would get compared a lot, where Virat Kohli's numbers were so high up there and Rahane almost seemed like he was trying to catch up. And this is what we are getting into next. Rahane, Pujara and Virat Kohli have always been compared to each other because post 2020 none of them have really performed, and we see Pujara and Rahane out of the side, whereas we continue to see Virat Kohli in the team. And a lot of people, including Sunil Gavaskar, thought Pujara was the scapegoat after the WTC final. A lot of you guys think that Rahane should be back, and him being dropped is just unfortunate. Now when you look at the yearly average together, you would realize that Virat Kohli and Pujara have had peaks. In 2016 and 17, Virat Kohli averaged 75.9 and 75.6, whereas Pujara averaged 55.7 and 67.1. And Pujara has had peaks early on in his career anyway. He's peaked 81.8 and 75.4 in 2012 and 13 respectively, whereas Rahane has only averaged 50 once by the end of the year. And not only that, but Rahane while walking into bat has only averaged 50 plus thrice. He's had a cumulative average of 50 plus in 144 innings only thrice, which, like I said, means that while walking into bat there's only been 3 innings or 3 occasions in which he's averaged 50 plus. Virat Kohli has averaged 50 plus while walking into bat 45 times out of the 202 innings he has played so far. And Pujara has walked into bat with an average of 50 plus 36 times out of the 170 innings that he has played. Now if you compare the 50s ratio, Rahane gets a 50 every 3.7 innings. Virat Kohli is going through this horrible form post 2020 and he continues to play. He's played most number of matches, yet he's got a 50 plus score every 3.3 innings, and Pujara has got a 50 plus score every 3.2 innings. Now let's compare him to other batters who've batted at the number 5 position. The top contender in this list is Misbah-ul-Haq. Rahane has played most number of innings than Misbah, except Misbah has scored more runs with a better average. Misbah-ul-Haq has played 91 innings with an average of 52.89, whereas Rahane has played 106 innings batting at number 5 with an average of just 37.38. Batting at number 5, Misbah would get a 50 plus score every 2.2 innings, whereas Rahane would get a 50 plus score every 3.6 innings. Now all of this are numbers we can dissect into. If you also want an average, if you want to know what their averages are post 2020, if you compare Virat Kohli, Rahane and Pujara, Virat Kohli averages 32.75 post 2020, Rahane averages 25.39 and Pujara averages 29.69. As you can see, even here Rahane has a lower average. Now, a lot of people might argue that Rahane, more often than not, when he comes into bat, because he bats at number 5, he's either batting with the tail or trying to build a partnership, which is also why we've looked at cumulative average and runs. Now, of course, if you look at the cumulative runs, Virat Kohli and Pujara would have more runs, especially because they bat top of the order. But the gap between Pujara and Rahane is massive when compared to Pujara and Virat Kohli. They've stayed so close almost their entire career as compared to a Rahane. Now, even without going into the numbers, now if you look at the cumulative average per innings, you would realize that Pujara, Rahane and Virat Kohli, for the most part of their career, were batting with an average of 40 plus, except Rahane has this massive dip around his 47th match where he just couldn't recover after that. Even without going into big numbers, you just realize that Rahane just kept getting worse and worse, regardless of his odd performance where he would dig India out of a hole. But regardless of all of that, he would just keep getting worse and worse as compared to Pujara and Virat Kohli. Again, even on this graph, you can see that Virat and Pujara are way close to each other as compared to a Rahane and a Pujara, which is essentially the problem. Rahane just kept getting worse and worse over the years, whereas Virat and Pujara's worse years weren't as bad as Rahane, and this was essentially the problem. Rahane was batting with stalwarts of Indian cricket of that generation. Pujara and Virat Kohli would score those heaps of runs where sometimes Rahane didn't need to, but post 2020 when Rahane needed to because the two stalwarts were out of form, Rahane also just stopped performing. And this is the major issue. Rahane wasn't a scapegoat. Rahane wasn't anything. The fact that if you look at his yearly average and then compare him to the other two batters and then argue by saying that, hey, he wasn't that bad, but then when you break it down further and you realize that Rahane just kept getting worse and worse, even if Kohli and Pujara kept getting worse and worse, like I said, their worse wasn't as bad as Rahane. And to be able to carry Rahane while Shreyas Iyer at that time was performing in domestic cricket didn't seem fair at all. And a lot of people can argue that about Virat Kohli right now, but that's for another day, that's for another topic. And that is the problem with Rahane, the batter. It wasn't the technique, it wasn't the inability of him to play spin or pace, it wasn't the fact that he wasn't street smart or batting smart, it was just his mental game giving him up. It was the fact that he wasn't as disciplined as he needed to be. He tried to change his game and become more attacking, but in a way he just became someone who would poke his bat at the fourth stump outside off, just like a Virat Kohli he would do right now. A lot of people compare Rahane to KL Rahul, which I don't think is fair at all, because if you compare these two guys, Rahane is way ahead of even someone like a KL Rahul. But Rahane, the player, was supposed to be the next Indian captain. But Rahane, the batter, now is trying to get back into form in Ranji cricket to even get a headline in the newspapers. This has been our video. Thank you so much for watching. We put out 3 videos per week, Mondays, Tuesdays and Fridays. So like, share and subscribe, all that good stuff we put out. We have a lot of cricket coming up with the T20 series against South Africa and the all be waiting Border Gavaskar Trophy in Australia. Lots of stuff coming. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.